All right, we're going to talk about getting into topic 3.1 here through 3.3. So we're moving into the genetics unit. So I'll give you guys a moment to process what you're looking at. Why the long face? So what we're going to be learning about, genes, that they are inheritable. So it's a heritable factor that consists of a length of DNA and influences specific characteristics. Genes occupy specific positions on one type of chromosome. The various specific forms of a gene are called alleles. That's an important term, so you're going to need to know that one. Alleles differ from each other by one or a few bases only. New alleles are formed by mutation. The genome is the whole of the genetic information of an organism. So each of us has our own individual genomes. And the entire base sequence of human genes was sequenced in the Human Genome Project. So, a gene is a heritable factor that controls a specific characteristic or trait. So it's a section of DNA that forms a protein when transcribed and translated. You guys remember from protein synthesis. So we're looking at that sequence of DNA, and that specific gene codes for a specific protein. It is passed on from parents to offspring. Remember that DNA in the nucleus contains those genes which code for the proteins that determine your traits. So thinking back to protein synthesis, how we learned how that DNA got transcribed and then translated into proteins. Right? Remember, we went from DNA to mRNA to the protein, to the sequence of amino acids to the protein. Remember that the protein functions that lead to traits, they're enzymes. They run all the chemical reactions. There are some structural proteins like in your skin, your hair, your nails, also muscles. And then there are also pigments that we just learned about in photosynthesis, proteins that are pigments, and that gives our hair color, eye color, etc. A gene occupies a specific position on one type of chromosome. The location of the gene on the chromosome is called the locus. So that's where the gene is located on the chromosome. So the gene for insulin is always on chromosome 11. Okay? And remember, you'll have two copies of each gene, one on each homologous chromosome, one that you got from mom, one that you got from dad. The alleles we mentioned earlier are different forms or variations of a gene. They occupy the same locus or location. They differ from each other by only one or a few nitrogen bases. The different alleles have a slight variation in the base sequence, which gives rise to the variation we observe in living organisms. So maybe some genes have like two alleles. For example, you see there the flower color alleles, purple flowers and then white flowers. And you see how we're using a capital letter for P, a capital letter P for purple and lowercase p for white flowers. And you'll learn shortly what that all means. So in this diagram, you see that one gene, but two alleles of the same gene. Okay, so one gives that plant white flowers and one gives it purple flowers. So gene and allele, remember that the gene is what the actual trait is, and the allele is that version of the trait. Okay? So you've got an example of like, okay, there's a gene that we all have for eye color. And then the alleles would be whether you have brown eyes or blue eyes or etc. Okay? And remember that alleles are located at the locus, which is the same for each chromosome. Mutations. Mutations are mistakes in the nucleotide sequence of a gene. Okay? This can happen any number of ways. So one way is where there's just a mistake in DNA replication, and accidentally C doesn't pair up with a G, and maybe somehow T pairs up with a G, and you've got an issue there that has changed the amino acid sequence. Other environmental factors are exposure to mutagens like ultraviolet light, cigarette smoke, x-rays, chemicals, etc. Most mutations in a gene cause bad consequences, like sickle cell anemia, but some can have good consequences, which they may be creating a new allele in a specific species that actually helps the species survive and becomes more prominent through natural selection. So, chromosome structure. So remember, prokaryotic and eukaryotic chromosomes exist differently. Remember that prokaryotes have a nucleoid region, where eukaryotes, all the chromosomes are located in the nucleus. Prokaryotes have small circular plasmids of DNA, and eukaryotes do not have plasmids. Prokaryotic DNA does not have proteins associated with it, where the DNA is wrapped around those histone proteins we've talked about previously. And in prokaryotes, there's only one chromosome in the nucleoid region, where eukaryotic DNA, there are two or more chromosomes. Okay, so you see the two different eukaryotic and prokaryotic pictures there. Okay. So they are located in the chromosomes are located in the nucleus of the cell. DNA wraps around the proteins called histones to form nucleosome cores. They are referred to as chromatin when they're wrapped around like that. Okay, and the chromatin will coil up and supercoil during cell division. And if you guys remember, during DNA replication, during mitosis, that happens during the S phase of interphase. A chromosome is composed of two identical sister chromatids and are attached at a centromere. The centromere is like the center of that X, that cross of the X. Okay? eukaryotic chromosomes of sexually reproducing species occur in pairs called homologs or homologous pairs. So, humans have 46 chromosomes that occur in 23 homologous pairs. So what you're looking at right there is a picture of all 23 pairs of human chromosomes. Homologous chromosomes are about the same length and size, and they carry the same sequence of genes. The alleles on each pair are not necessarily the same. So you could get one allele from your father and one allele from your mother, and then when we get deeper into genetics and Punnett squares, we'll learn about dominant and recessive alleles, which ones will present if you get one of each. Okay, one from each pair comes from the mom and one comes from the father. You get, so for example, you get an allele from mom and an allele from dad for eye color. Okay, and one might be an allele for brown eyes, while maybe your dad is passing along the allele for blue eyes. Okay, so in that case, we need to determine which one is the dominant allele, which means what color eyes you'll actually have. When homologous chromosomes are stained with special dyes, they show the same banding pattern and the same centromere location. So the banding patterns you see are those darker areas. Both homologous chromosomes should look the same. And then you see where the centromere is of each of those pairs. So what's the same about homologous chromosomes? They code for the same genes. They're the same size. They have the same banding pattern and centromere location. But what's different is they may have different alleles. Okay, like one may have blue eyes or one may have brown eyes, and their origin. One came from mom, one came from dad. Diploid versus haploid. So diploid cells are every cell in our body except for one type of cell. They carry 2 copies of each chromosome. So they have all 46 chromosomes that our species of humans has. So diploid cells in all types of organisms have their specific number. We humans have 46. These are found in your somatic cells, your body cells. So all your bone cells, your nerve cells, your skin cells, your hair cells, your blood cells, etc. So again, we have 46 chromosomes, so a diploid cell would have 46 chromosomes in it, a human diploid cell. Haploid cells have 1 copy of each chromosome. Haploid, half. If you can remember, haploid, half. Haploid cells have half the chromosomes of the species. So in humans, a haploid cell would have 23 chromosomes. This is the type of cell that you only find 1 type of these cells in your body, and that's our gametes, which are our sex cells. So in males, we're talking about the sperm cell. In females, we're talking about the egg cell. Sperm cells, egg cells have 23 chromosomes. Why? Well, because during fertilization, the sperm cell fertilizes the egg cell, combining the 23 chromosomes from the sperm, 23 from the egg, giving us a fertilized egg is a diploid cell now, having the full complement of 46 chromosomes. There are no homologous pairs in haploid cells, and these cells are formed by a special type of cell division called meiosis. So, take a look here. See if you can figure out the haploid number for a chicken, the haploid number for a chimpanzee, diploid number for a frog, chromosome number of a frog sperm, and the chromosome number in a chimp somatic cell. So don't get tricked up there. Whoop. So the haploid number for a chicken should be half of that 78 we see there. So it should be 39. The haploid number for a chimpanzee would be half that 48, which is 24. The diploid number for a frog has got the full amount of chromosomes, so that 26 is the correct answer for number 3. The chromosome number for a frog sperm, though, remember sperm are gametes, they're haploid cells, so it would actually be 13 for the frog sperm. And then a chimpanzee somatic cell is a body cell, so it's not a haploid cell, it's a diploid cell. So that would be 48 for the chimpanzee somatic cell. So we talked about meiosis, and this is the cell division that creates the haploid gametes for sexual reproduction. So we're comparing mitosis and meiosis there. You see on the left, mitosis starts with a somatic cell. DNA replicates, which gives it 4 copies of the chromosomes, and then it splits. It divides through the phases of prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and then you end up with 2 identical daughter cells that are exactly the same as the parent cell. In meiosis, you start off with a diploid cell. The DNA replicates. But then you go through 2 cell divisions. So the reason you end up with half the number of chromosomes in meiosis is you go through 1 replication, but 2 divisions. Okay? So in mitosis, the daughter cells are identical to each other and the same as the parent cell. But in meiosis, you see at the bottom, the daughter cells are different from each other and from the parent cell, and they contain half the chromosomes. So, as I said, meiosis is referred to as reductive division because the chromosome number is cut in half. It's cut in half because you have 1 DNA replication, but then 2 divisions. So that cuts the number in half there. Meiosis is also a type of cell division that produces the gametes. And remember, they have half the number of chromosomes. The resulting daughter cells are not identical like in mitosis. Each one's different. Meiosis takes place in the gonads. So ovaries in females and the testes in males. This takes place in organisms that reproduce sexually. Okay, so that's where you take two haploid gametes and they combine to form one offspring daughter diploid cell with the full complement of chromosomes. So you see you've got your 23 chromosomes in your egg, 23 chromosomes in a sperm. It fertilizes the egg. It becomes known as a zygote, which is a fertilized egg, and that has the 46 total chromosomes. That goes on to develop into an embryo, fetus, and then a live human being. So the purpose of mitosis is to make identical diploid cells for processes like cell growth, embryonic development, and repair of tissue. The purpose of meiosis is only to make haploid gametes for the purpose of sexual reproduction. And that's where we're going to hold up. Thank you.